The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents, Which Version of the Bible Should I Read? So we're going to be going through some questions over the next couple of videos that I get frequently from both patrons and from people who have watched the videos. And which translation of the Bible should I read is something I get quite often from atheists. Now, if you want to just skip the whole video, the short answer is that most of the time it doesn't really matter that much. Probably any Bible you can get your hands on will be good enough for whatever it is you want to do. But the questions you need to ask yourself at the outset are, what is it that I want to do? Why am I bothering to study the Bible? Why am I paying any attention to this at all? Is it to be able to have conversations about the Bible? Is it to have a better understanding? Is it so that I can know the right answers from the Bible when I'm engaging with believers? And if that's what you're trying to do and you're trying to find the right translation, well, the short, easy answer is there is no right translation, but we'll get to that in a little bit. There's a bunch of resources that I make use of that I wanted to be able to share with other people. One is BibleGateway.com. Most people are familiar with it. It's a quick and easy online, open your browser, go to BibleGateway.com, and you now have access to the entire Bible and a number of other resources as well in many different translations. And if you just pull down the drop down for the translations, you might be surprised at how many translations there are. Even within, I would guess probably 40, 50, even within just the English section. The most popular, most common ones, obviously the King James Bible, the New International Version, or NIV. There's the NASB, which is the New American Standard Bible. There's the HCSB, the RSV, the New King James Version. There's constantly new versions. I brought some of my Bibles and some that you can recommend. By the way, a great Bible site, which I've talked about previously, the Skeptics Annotated Bible. I do recommend exercising some caution because not everything that you find in there that is listed as an objection or a contradiction is necessarily going to be that. But it's a good starting point for many things. You can begin there and then move out and branch out to Bible Gateway, or you can go to Wikipedia articles about things, or you can visit apologist websites when you run across something that is troubling. It's unlikely we're going to we're not finding anything new in almost any version of the Bible. Most of this has been raised and addressed before. There's one other tool that I make use of. It's installed on my laptop. I've had it for years. I don't know if it's still available, but it was available at e-sword.net. I apologize, I didn't go look it up. I'm assuming it's still there. It's the electronic sword of the Lord. It's a tool that is specifically designed to help preachers study the Bible. And it's great in the sense that you can load as many Bible translations as it supports. You can view them in a sort of lateral arrangement, so you can pick out those. You can cross-reference. And many of the Bible versions have hyperlinks to Bible dictionaries and to concordances, so that if you are reading this particular passage and you're like, hey, that word there, it seems to be the trouble spot, let me go look up, and it'll take you to what the actual Hebrew word is, or the Greek or the Aramaic, or wherever it's coming from, and it'll talk about various translations. You have to be careful here, because unless you are an expert in these ancient languages, and probably in the sort of interpretations that we would have to do to understand what this might have meant in its original form, you can make tons of mistakes. Just as if you didn't speak English and someone handed you an English dictionary, you go in and you look at how a word is used. You pick up the word bad, and that word bad could be how we normally would use bad, or it could mean good, or whatever else. It could be a number of different things. If you pick the wrong ones, you could make a word salad out of a verse. So I caution people to not dig too deeply at first, and it may in fact be unnecessary. I'll point to a couple. By the way, Skeptics Annotated Bible is actually available in a printed version as well. And it's really well done. So you can go, I'm just going to open here at random. Well, I opened to a page that has no notes. But here we go, just Psalm 135, verse 5, for I know that the Lord is great and that our Lord is above all gods. And then on the side note, it says there, our Lord is above all gods. How many gods are there? Probably a good jumping off point for a lecture, but we're not going to do that today because I want to get through this discussion about Bible translations. I will. I'll add something in about henotheism and monotheism and polytheism and stuff, but this is a printed version that you can buy. It's also, you can go to skeptics.annotedbible.com. This is one of my wife's Bibles called the Teacher's Bible. And this translation is in HCSB, which is, I don't know, I have to look. It's the Holman Christian Standard Bible. I keep wanting to say Holt, but Holman Christian Standard Bible. This one's pretty popular among Southern Baptists. It's reasonably new. My wife's version, of course, has lots of flags and notes from hers. I could not find my King James version that I have all dotted up with notes and everything, but I do have my New International Version. I've talked about this before. I bought this, and it was not cheap. This is a copyrighted text, the New International Version. So while things like the King James Version are available for free, they're in the public domain. This is a copyrighted new translation, and it is a really good resource on its own. For example, if you just look at this particular page right here, below the actual text, there are a bunch of footnotes and notes, and it's a really good study Bible. May not be the one for you, depends on what you're looking for. I also have here another one of my wife's Bibles. Between the two of us, we've probably got 10 or 15 Bibles. I will say that growing up, I had a King James, which is what I used probably all from the time I was an infant until I grew up and left home. I bought the NIV specifically because my dad had bought an NIV, and I knew if we wanted to have conversations about it, I wanted to be using the same version, which I think is one of the reasons people ask this question. This is her teen study Bible, so it's got all kinds of cool graphics and call-outs, or at least maybe these were cool in the 90s. But you've got, different fonts and all that stuff. Nobody cares about that. Let's get a Bible that looks cool. Well, that's actually part of how we got so many translations. More about that in a second. So you'd think that one Bible would be enough. Why would there need to be any other Bibles? Can't God communicate in a way where he gets his point across and makes it accessible to everybody? Well, evidently not. I think it's because there's no reason to think he exists or ever inspired anything. But when it comes to Bible translations, there's a number of different issues to look at, which is why I recommend the sites that allow you to look at multiple translations, and specifically the ones that let you dig in a little deeper with concordances and dictionaries. If this is something you actually want to study and learn, then do it and do it right. That said, we have a number of different source texts for modern Bibles. There's the Septuagint, the Masoretic, the Latin Vulgate, etc., and they cover different areas of the Bible and different time periods. I think the Septuagint is older than the Masoretic, but don't quote me, because I'm not overly concerned about that. I'm not trying to be a Bible scholar on the original sources. I'll get to why that doesn't matter in a minute, but why do we have different translations, and what categories do those translations fall into? The first category is literal translations. And these are things like the King James Version is a literal one. There's also maybe the New American Standard is an attempt at a literal translation. And then we move away from literal translations to more conceptual or figurative, paraphrased translations. And my favorite example, when I was a kid growing up, there was a Bible, which is still around, called the Good News Bible. That and the Living Bible were both kind of paraphrased more along the lines of thought than they were the exact words. There are some newer Bibles that attempt to make it, hip. The Teen Bible changes the language a little bit. I did a talk on children's Bibles, which is as far out as you can get on the conceptual end, because we're really just paraphrasing stories and doing it in a way that kids can understand. We're not going word for word. It's interesting, though, to figure out when they do go word for word, why they might choose to do that. We all, in modern Western culture, think of things probably in terms of the King James Version because it was the most popular version for a number of years, which is why we will say things like "thou shalt not kill," even though we don't use the word "thou" now. This change in our language is what makes it necessary for people to come up with new translations. And just in the last 150 years to 200 years, there have been a number of attempts at this. Living Bible, Good News Bible, the modern King James. So there's the King James, then there's the King James Authorized Version, and then there's the modern King James, the 20th century King James. I think there's even an update to the NIV, maybe the, 22nd century NIV, something along those lines. We have all these because people are trying to find a way to make this ancient text relevant and approachable to people. That's it. And what we'll find is that in many cases, especially as we have this new translation, it may differ from an old translation. In some cases, they may be, the verse may be the same across 10, 12 translations. In some cases, it's going to be a little different. So the question that raises in my mind when I see this is, okay, here's a different translation. Is this one more word for word accurate to the original, which we don't know because we don't have it? Or is it conceptually more accurate? Or is it just easier to understand? Or is this a way to make money? If we sit down and we say, take the King James Version and rewrite it so that it says the same thing, but we say it in a slightly different way, now we've got something new to sell. We've got something we can potentially copyright. This, in other areas, would be called plagiarizing. But we're sharing the good news, and so it's okay to copyright it and sell it and make money off it. After all, people had to spend their time working. Why? This gets back to what I asked before. Why can't God give us the one true Bible? This plagiarizing mindset, by the way, might be why William Lane Craig was accused of plagiarizing his doctoral thesis. He apparently lifted passages from somebody else's work and changed the wording just slightly so that it wasn't word for word but contained the same concept. And in some cases, the words and the pacing were the same. I didn't make this video to beat up on Craig, but I will say that it's amusing to me that this constant mindset of, hey, let's make the Bible new and fresh again. Hey, let's make the Bible new and fresh again, coupled with the idea that someone could copyright a Bible. Like, for example, if I were just to read from the NIV, just to read it, I probably wouldn't end up in too much legal trouble. But if I were to do critiques of portion of the NIV, that might fall under fair use. But if I were to copy this and try to sell it, I would definitely get sued. But that's not true for a King James Version or anything else that's in the public domain. I could sell my version, which is how Ray Comfort can sell his modified version of a Bible. And plus you add stuff into it. So back to the issue at hand. If we've got some versions that are literal and some that are figurative and some like the NIV, which try to walk a line down the middle, which version do I use? Which one's right? Well, as I noted earlier, the short answer is there's no way to know. This is not a problem that atheists can solve. It's not even a problem that theists can solve. We have a number of different translations, and many of them are tied to specific religions. Catholics have their own version of the Bible. Jews have their version of the Old Testament, the Torah. Baptists may tend to use either a King James Version or an HCSB or an NIV. Some of them are more used in liberal churches. Some of them are more used in fundamentalist churches. And that kind of tells you about some of the changes you're likely to run across in there. If you have a more liberal church that's going to focus more on equality and love, that translation is going to be a little bit different than the ones that are more fire and brimstone and you are damned to hell. In a recent video I did about the Bible and rape, if you dig through some of those passages, you'll find that the more conceptual versions of the Bible tend to soften those passages. That's the other reason, not just to make money, not just to make it hip, but to make it more approachable. Not just accessible in the sense that you can read it, but approachable in the sense that you're not going to have your eyeballs jump out of your head and you're not going to run screaming from the room because somebody's telling you they worship a God that advocated for slavery and rape. So some versions soften the passages. Now, an interesting thing here is that the 1611 version of the King James Bible, which is known by many as the Authorized Version, is regarded by some as the only English translation that is truly authorized by God, which is why it's called the Authorized Version. It's the only one that any English-speaking people should actually read. You can find websites that will talk about why they are King James only, and specifically the AV 1611, the year that it was written, 1611, or published, why that version is the only one. And they will list verses that appear in that don't appear in others, or that are either omitted in other versions, or are bracketed or footnoted or softened in other versions. They have the one true Bible. By the way, there's a joke here, which I'm going to discourage people from using, even though it's funny, because it gets played around as if it were true. Recently, I saw it attributed to Michelle Bachmann, and prior to that, it was attributed to the first female governor of Texas, and it was about English language, and saying if English was good enough for Jesus Christ, then it should be good enough for Texans. Which the truth is that this, as far as we can tell, dates back to an old joke that was making fun of uneducated people. The original joke had a farmer who was saying, "Why would I need a new Bible if the King's English was good enough for St. Paul? It's good enough for me." The joke, of course, being that none of this was written in English. But it's not true that it was said by Michelle Bachmann. It is almost certainly not true that it was said by that governor of Texas. It goes back to an old joke, so I'd throw that in to exercise some caution. Here's the thing. You can spend your life studying the differences between the Septuagint, the Masoretic, the Latin Vulgate. You can learn dead languages, and you can investigate and explore that, and you can spend your life trying to come up with what the one true English interpretation should be. People have done this. You probably don't need to, unless it's just a strong matter of curiosity for you. If it's a sort of perverse interest of yours, you really don't need to, because there's no way to tell which version's right. You're not going to get to that answer. In discussions with people, I recommend that you find out what their preferred translation is, if in fact the translation makes any difference at all. As I've pointed out before, most people don't know the history of their religion. Most people don't know what's in their Bible. Most people don't even know this information about the different versions. They don't get involved in that. And they may not even know what their version says. They may have concepts that come from the New International Version that their preacher uses, even though at home they've got a King James or an HCSB or an NASB, or a Revised Standard is also popular. If they don't really know what's in their book, then which version you have, it doesn't matter. And if you go out and try to find the one version that you need to study, I'm going to study this version because it's the NIV, probably the most popular version of the Bible amongst Protestant evangelicals worldwide, I think, or at least that was the case. You're still going to find out that you're in a conversation with somebody at some point where you've studied the wrong Bible, and they'll raise it and say, you think this because you studied the NIV. That's not the real Bible. Don't think this is going to happen? Well, it's happened to me over and over again. When people see that I've quoted from an NIV or see that I have an NIV, I've had some people who are fans of the Authorized Version, the AV 1611 King James, tell me that the reason I'm an atheist is because I was taught from the wrong version of the Bible. If I would have had the right version of the Bible, I would have remained true and in the faith. And that's when I get to tell them that I actually grew up with the King James. I can't be certain that mine is an AV 1611 until I actually go dig it out of a closet, but it doesn't matter. Even if you had a good understanding of the process under which we translate Bibles, the source material, the differences between them, it's unlikely you're going to convince somebody that their preferred translation, if they have one, is wrong. It's just unlikely that that's going to happen. And so you have to deal with the translation that they're presenting. So if they come to you and say that they really love the Good News Bible, there may be some value in pointing out that that Bible, which is on the far conceptual end, doesn't actually get to, it doesn't come from, isn't an attempt at a literal translation, and therefore it may be missing some things. But at the end of the day, if all they care about is this is the one that I use and I'm going to believe what it says, you have to deal with that on those terms. So when people write in to say, hey, what version of the Bible should I use? Whichever one is being used by the person that you're going to have a conversation with, which means you might need to spend some time studying a number of different translations. Most of the time, though, it just doesn't matter. Even with their own translation, they may not know what's in there. And if you spend your time dancing around this circle about how their translation is right and your translation is wrong, there's a really easy solution to this. Ask them how you can tell which one is the right one and why their God has authored, apparently, and allowed to be authored, so much confusion. Why hasn't God delivered the one book that does not change, that does not need interpretation? Deliver it directly in a number of different languages if need be. This is where you can actually make a little bit of headway. Now, what's probably going to happen is this. Oh, well, you need to read it and the Holy Spirit will move in you. And now you need to have a conversation about the methods by which we can actually tell what is right and true. Have they bothered to study to see if their version is accurate to the best and oldest manuscripts? The answer is almost certainly no. I've had some of them flat out tell me that they don't even care what the Old Testament says. They just focus on the words of Jesus. Which, by the way, it's often handy to get a red letter edition so you can go directly to what is attributed to Jesus. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which version you're studying. It matters what version they will accept. And for that reason, I don't recommend that anybody go out and spend $75 on a New International Version, especially when you can read the NIV at Bible Gateway for free. I wouldn't spend a penny on another Bible. I don't have to. They tend to get given to me. And if you really want a physical book that you can carry around with you, next time you're in a hotel, just take the one that Gideon's left. That's what it's there for. People I know have played Hide the Bible, where they go into the hotels. I think Jeff D and others suggested it. They find the Gideon Bible and they hide it. And I've done this before and had fun with it. Now I just take them. Maybe you can make an art project out of it. Maybe you can use it for kindling. But the Gideons left it there so you could take it, and so you should. And then you'll have a physical Bible if you really need one. And when somebody says to you, oh, you don't have the right version of the Bible, this is the one that the Gideons left me. How could the Gideons not be handing out the right version of the Bible? If that's the case, shouldn't you, as a Christian with the right Bible, be campaigning against the Gideons to get them to stop giving people the wrong information? Free Bible, free argument, free befuddled look on the face of your interlocutor. See you next time. This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.